You are now tuned into Brave Conversations. Hey, Max.
Hey, what's up?
No, you're good, my man.
I'm okay.
All right, cool. So today we're chatting a bit about Gen Z and how they broke the funnel. So there's a recent article that you published. You took a point of view on what Gen Z are doing and how they've kind of broken everything for all of us. And I'm just interested in understanding what your point of view is. So how has social media shifted the way we are supposed to be interacting with Gen Z? And what should we be thinking about as marketers?
All right. So social media is a good point to start with, but actually I think we can take a step back, because when I was thinking about this, I put it in terms of three forces.
Okay.
So
You're so intelligent. Matt's three forces. Let's call it Matt's three forces.
we like frameworks. I work with frameworks.
All right, Matt's three forces.
But those three forces, so you have channels,
Yeah.
you have formats, and then you've also got the barriers to entry.
Okay.
So by that, when you look at the channels, I think back when we started doing this funnel exercise, just say, here's this linear funnel that people go through.
Yeah.
The channels could be split between in-home and out-of-home. So let's say in-home is your TV, maybe radio, maybe magazines.
Yeah.
Out-of-home, you've got billboards, probably flyers,
Right.
and point of sale.
Okay.
And that's very clear and very simple. And then you look at the formats as well. So with TV, radio, magazines,
So there's like,
you've got ads, you've got print ads, you've got blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Out of home, same thing, very simple formats. And then lastly, barriers to entry. So I think when we were thinking of this linear funnel, there were very high barriers to entry. So I don't know how many companies back then could afford to have an advertising agency.
Okay.
So right now I heard a crazy stat. I think about 40,000 ad agencies in America.
40,000.
Yeah. Yeah, like right now, which is a lot. And I think maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you start thinking about this funnel, it might have been a lot less.
Got it.
So now anyone can pretty much afford an advertising agency, so to speak. And people can also appear on these channels quite easily, which we'll get to. But we have these three forces. So your channels, your formats, and your barriers to entry.
Right.
And then there was the smartphone.
Insert Netflix chime.
And which which generation was born into the smartphone? Your Gen Zs. And the smartphone just completely destroys all of that. So your channels, where you had your in-home, out-of-home, it's all on that smartphone.
Right.
Formats your smartphone becomes your TV, it becomes your radio, it becomes your magazine, etc. And you can get 60-second ads, you can get a whole film, you can get a whole movie.
Right.
But if you just look at Instagram, for instance, on the smartphone, that whole thing of going from awareness to consideration to conversion, that's done in just one carousel.
Right.
So you start with the opening slide, or at least the opening panel, and that grabs your attention, makes you aware of the brand. You swipe left, and suddenly you can see a bit more from an education point of view.
Yeah.
And then you can convert, because there's always that buy now call to action. You just click, you Apple Pay.
So in one frame, you got to go through the entire funnel.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And the other thing that you are seeing with the smartphone is that it's not very restrictive.
Okay.
So when you look at something like a funnel, it says, here's clear lines, here's clear stages that people go through, and they're going to go down.
Yeah.
And that was evident when you had very few channels, very few formats, etc.
Yeah.
But now you can swipe left, you can swipe right, you can swipe down, you can swipe up,
Right.
Swipe left, diagonal, whatever you want. You can click, Apple Pay. So you have no limitations.
Okay.
And we're speaking to a generation now that has no limitations. So this funnel, that is a clear limitation on how we execute our stuff, they don't align to that.
So if it's not top to bottom, what is it now? How do they?
Now it's left to right, it's up, it's down, it's long press, it's short press, it's watch, it's Apple Pay, it's double click, it's a whole lot of things.
It's interesting because the article that I read talks about this like loop almost, right? It's an infinity loop as opposed to start point, end point.
Yeah.
I think they spoke about inspiration, then there's exploration, then there's community or something, and then there's loyalty, right? So it's almost like a loop.
Yeah.
So in this loop, because it was quite clear on a funnel, measure the top, how many do you reach, measure how many people have kind of considered, and then measure on your board.
Yeah.
if it's an infinity loop, does the same kind of metric apply? How do you now measure success?
So what that article also tried to explain is that there isn't a point where people start and then they suddenly purchase at the end. Instead, now it might be that they get inspiration and then they already purchase from there. Or they get into the exploration stage and they already purchase from there. And you just keep going through this loop and you might not even purchase because as you have articulated, you've got your inspiration phase. So this is where you're supposed to be doing just storytelling.
Right.
Just give people entertainment, tell the story of your brand, expose yourself, or at least put yourself out there, personality. Then you get into exploration. So this is where now our buying behavior is we don't just buy something. We have to look at a review. We have to see if someone on YouTube has already tried it before we actually buy it. And so that's what you're getting in exploration. Sometimes it's comments on the actual post where people are saying, I actually like this thing. Sometimes it's reviews. Sometimes it's mentions. And it could be your own brand education. So here's our product page. Here's all the benefits, etc. And after that, you get into community. So people, I think one of the things that is fascinating is ever since we had Facebook groups, that hasn't disappeared. Every format that we have, or at least every channel that we have, whether it's WhatsApp, Messenger, Slack, Teams, there's always groups. People like groups. Reddit has outlived a lot of the platforms that were started.
We thought the thing was going to die.
Exactly.
Still like,
that's how activation still work as well, because people like to have your sub-community, or your subculture, that you can actually be excited around some product, some brand, or just some activity. And then you've got loyalty. And the interesting thing about loyalty is sometimes I explain to my friends that I have an iPhone, that's about the only Apple product I have, but I'm the biggest fan of it. Like, I will tell you, I will buy it.
But you haven't even tried it yourself.
I don't know. But this one is awesome. But that's the thing about Gen Z is that even though they're not the customers of the actual product they have imported, they can still be loyalists. They can still be advocates. And so what you're doing throughout all those phases, just being present in a meaningful way. And there might be purchase at each point. But you're not necessarily saying you start here and you end here and this is what the purchase happens. You just keep going.
So let's talk about mechanics, right? I have always been very fascinated by, especially on TikTok, like challenges, right? So now we've got this new funnel. We've got this crazy cohort of consumers called Gen Z that have changed everything. As you say, kind of they're always in this infinity loop of discovering, being inspired, then buying. And then I see this like craze about different challenges, right? So in your mind, is that a gimmick? Is it a tactic to get people inspired and exploring? And how do the tactics now shift if you've got a very different model in which you kind of understand how people engage and consume? And that's not one of the exam questions, so think very hard about it. I did tell you I was gonna go. I still remember it. I didn't remember any of these questions.
I mean, so one of the ways that I was thinking about that and why these tactics might be effective, or let's actually take a step back. I think what's interesting is that for us, when you think about social media,
who's us? Let's find us.
Millennials, and you're not a boomer, are you?
No, really, like a boomer.
You've got 2 kids.
That's ageist. Anyway, us millennials.
So when we post stuff, it's just to go out to our friends, and we think it's just going to our friends. Whereas the Gen Z or Generation Z, they're posting stuff, putting it on TikTok, and it's going out to some random stranger in China.
Correct.
And I think for them, it's just about this freedom to just put stuff out there and get some reactions, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It's just as long as I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it gives a sense of being alive, a sense of being active, a sense of having purpose. And so when we bring these challenges in, I think what might be seen as cool, if I can be so bold, because now you're at school, you've got friends that are posting and they're getting a whole lot of likes there, and you're not doing it. But once you have something like a challenge, it gives you at least a framework, or at least a format to create your own stuff and then put it out there. And then you're also part of the cool kids, or at least not just being cool, but being active in how they are active. I think for us, it was playing cards and then knowing what happened with the sports on the weekend because we read the newspaper. But for them, it's I'm out there. I've got stuff, I'm not getting reactions. So I think it gives them something that they can do to actually do the activity that they love. And it's a nice framework. And so that's part of the community building tactic or even the loyalty building tactic. But yeah, I think what we can take from this is that whole notion of build it and they will come. I think prompt it and they will fly. As
They will dance. Prompt it and they'll dance. So what's your view on influencers? How do they fit in this mix now? So everything's shifted. It's a circular thing. As you said, there's mechanisms you can get them to kind of have a bridge into this world and be it a dance or whatever it may be. What role do influencers play in this new circular system?
So let's go back to the what you call it, the framework, and then say the channels, the format, Matt's phrase to entry, exactly. the end phrase. And those barriers to entry are now very low. So I can create content very easily. I can use my phone to do it, and I can post it very easily because I use my smartphone to do it as well. And when you look at, so we go back there into our millennial starting. And I think one of the things that we were challenged with at that stage was that only certain people could appear on magazines or appear on TV, or appear in whatever medium. And there was also high barriers to entry there. I mean, there was centralized TV, where now we've got streaming, we've got YouTube, you can get video anywhere. So there were certain models that were allowed to be on these channels. And we had a bit of a crisis, let's call it, of misrepresentation. So only certain people were allowed to be famous or be featured. And it felt like a lot of people were excluded.
Right.
And now you look at influencers, and they represent pretty much everyone. I think the Gen Z, or this generation that we're speaking about, they have this language around plus size models now, around diversity, inclusivity. And so what I think influencers do is they show you a version of yourself in that space with that product, using that brand, and then you can go, okay, I can see myself doing that as well. And I think that's the power of influencers. So initially it was people that were accessible, that could put your message out there. But I think now for this generation, there's people that look like me, that sound like me, that have my same context, and I can trust them to make recommendations without having to do it myself.
That's really interesting. So the statement you made is really powerful. So a version of yourself, right? So influencers, and this is very challenging for marketers, because when we sit and we plan, we do strategies, we always come up with target audience. And based on what you're saying around a version of yourself, an influencer may represent some part of who you are, but unlikely all of who you are. So when we're thinking strategically around targeting people using influencers, how do we get better at knowing that this influencer represents X part of Matabata or X part of whoever it may be that I'm trying to target? Because that's maturity, right? That's understanding that ultimately you won't have 100% share of consumer. You'll have a slice of the consumer. But when you do have a slice of the consumer, you have to match it with an influencer. Do you have any thoughts on how we can get better at that?
I love it. No thoughts at all. So I'm trying to think now, because one thing that came up was we have this wheel whenever we talk about brand personas, right? And this wheel represents different parts and what the brand could be. It could be the wise brand, it could be the jester, it could be the sage, all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And I think another thought that's coming up, and I might bounce around a bit, is when we were looking at how this generation acts online versus in person. I was surprised to find that they actually still are two different people, or components or parts of different people. So when I look at us, when we started signing up on Facebook, we had to use our real name. We had to use our real name. We almost had to use our real selves, and I think we thought of it as our real selves. Whereas it seems like this generation is saying, this is me online and this is me offline. Interesting. And I think when we look at influencers and we start to look at our segmentation, our personas in terms of our strategy, we probably need to say, okay, which part of our audience are we trying to represent with this influencer? Because we can't represent all of it. And I think one of the things that we try to do in strategy is to say you can't be everything, and you have to be something that you can actually control. What I'm starting to say to myself, and I've been using this a lot with other people, is you have to choose where you're going to lose. Because if you try to win at everything, you're going to lose at something. You're going to be very surprised.
That'd be the important thing you need to win at.
Like, how did I lose at this? But if you choose and say, this is probably where I'm going to lose because this is where I want to win, then that gives you a bit more control. And I think your influences and how you use influence should be, which part of our audience do we really want to resonate with? And which part can we actually forego? And maybe that choice, or at least that kind of criteria, can help you choose the correct influence and at least have some control in how you want to show up, as opposed to, let's see what works.
And that's exactly what strategy is, right? It's a set of choices. Sometimes the things you do and the things you choose not to do, which I think is great. Lovely nugget. Matt's nugget. Matt,
choose where you lose.
Last point, last question, then we'll wrap it up. Authenticity, right? So does that still resonate? Does it still make sense for brands to be chasing authenticity? And in the world now where there's discovery and there's inspiration, what role does that play for great marketing and great messaging?
So I think there's two thoughts here. So the one is, if you look at vocabulary that this generation is being exposed to, one is sports washing, greenwashing, woke washing. So I think they are aware when people are pretending that they're doing something.
So now they call it something and
exactly.
In the past.
Yeah, exactly. So there's words for pretending. It's not just being pretentious, but it's, we acting like we're doing these things, but we're not really doing this.
Sport washing is a thing.
Sport washing is a thing.
What is sport washing?
What's it called? Not is a country.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia is being accused for sports washing. So
really?
When they buy a team like Newcastle,
got it.
And when Qatar hosts the World Cup, that was all sports washing because they have all these atrocities. But they're like, don't worry about that. Look at the shiny World Cup. And so that's what they talk about when they say sports wash.
I thought you were talking about those guys that slap each other. Have you seen those that slapping national slap?
Russia.
Dude.
Yeah, I know, right?
But it's not become like this craze. And there's a South African guy, I forget his name. He's like the champion slappist. I wish I could be like a slappist. But receiving and giving slaps on a daily basis would be a wonderful pastime. That's slap washing.
Anyway, that's something you gotta do sometimes. But yes, okay. So you have the vocabulary that pretty much identifies when something is fake or when something is a pretense. But at the same time, and I just lost. Okay, we'll come back to this. When you read a book or you watch a movie, there's something about the character that you can actually believe. And I think what's been really good is that with the new release of movies, especially if you look at the Avengers, back then there was a Disney world. Here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, man. It's very clear. They're bad because they do this, and they're good because they do that. But now you look at someone like Thanos from Avengers, and you can kind of resonate with him. He was like, this world is terrible. There's too much of everything. Let's just put in half and everything can start again. And that kind of makes sense, except that you're killing half of the entire universe, so that's probably not good. But his motivations actually do sound like they are good, because he's just trying to make a better world for everyone. And so that just goes to say that when you create a character, there has to be something that you can actually kind of believe about that character, even though you don't agree with them completely. And I think that's where authenticity comes into play. And there has to be something you can believe about that brand that is actually evident when you look at that brand. So it's either the products that they have and the benefits that they have in the product, or something that they stand for as a brand, but they can prove through their actions and to how they've shown up that is actually something that they do.
Interesting. I like the reflection, because I was watching Three Body Problem, and this idea that you're bringing regarding there are classic good versus evil scenarios, and there's classic villain versus hero archetypes. And what I really like about the content that's been created now is that even in evil archetypes, there's a way you identify with it, right? So you're killing off the world, but you're doing it because you actually believe it's going to help save the next generations to come, and vice versa. You got the classic good archetype. You go, oh, you're a nice guy, but I'd actually kill you as well. Because that's
Tony Stark.
Correct, exactly. So that tension point is really fascinating as it plays out like Netflix and the rest of it. But it's a really great juxtaposition on how we should be thinking about building profiles and considering the people we're speaking to is that everyone is inherently good and inherently evil at the same time. And where you dial what up is really important from a strategic communications perspective.
And maybe it's not about thinking of it as authenticity, but rather as believable complexity.
That's another one. Complexity. And this will have a bit of a lexicon matter, right? Mannerisms. Yeah, here we go.
But the thing is, there's layers, right? And everything's got layers, and it's nice to explore things according to those different layers. But to have something to say, this is a very simple thing, and we are a happy brand, and that's what we are, is not believable anymore. So,
Last question. And this is the impossible question. Right. So, what is the location of every single atom on this planet right now? Come on, give it a bash.
So there's two ways to think about this.
Let's take a step back. I thought you were going to take a step back.
Yeah, let's take a step back to when all the atoms were at one point.
Okay, at one point then, where are they now? That's the question.
You see, so you have the Big Bang, and suddenly all the atoms are everywhere.
Oh, right.
But before that, they were all in one single point.
Yeah.
And if you really zoom out, are they still not in one single point? Because we're living on Earth right now.
Right.
And for us, everything is scattered around.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out, it's just a blue dot in space. So maybe the other answer is that it's all in our consciousness.
All right, man. Thanks so much. All the atoms are actually in one place.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
Just my consciousness.
Thanks, guys.
Be sure to tune into the next episode of Brave Conversations.